Hey everybody, Robot here for Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. If you're looking for all the parts to complete this job, just check us out on the web, ScooterWest.com. You can certainly call us as well, give us your VIN number, and we can get you the exact parts you need to complete this job successfully. So here I have a customer's Vespa LXV 150. This is a 2009 model. So just over 15 years old, and it's got a problem. First of all, it's pretty crispy, so I like to say. Actually, that's a term from my sales manager. He would always say if they're a little dry and rusty and beat up, they're crispy. So I kind of like that term. But there was an issue with this scooter. The brake was locked up when it was towed in, and the tech flushed the brakes, and we were able to free them up, but there's still issues with these crispy components. So you can see the brake caliper right here on the front wheel. If you're dealing with the 200cc or larger Vespas, they're also going to have a rear brake caliper. It's all similar steps, a little bit more work to get to, and you can see that's quite crispy. Here in San Diego, it's a coastal environment, so just like the Rust Belt, if these scooters are left outside near the coast for like 15 years straight, parts of that caliper start to seize up. Sometimes you can free them up, sometimes they'll develop a leak, but the worst thing that can happen is they actually lock up and drag the brake. And as the heat builds, it will get to a point where it'll drag the brakes so heavily that you can't even go forward or the wheel locks up. Another issue, probably even more common than the brake caliper failing, is the actual master cylinder going out. So this is referred to as a master cylinder. The right side is for your front. On this LXV 150, there's only a right side master cylinder. There's specific parts depending on the year, the model, and even if the scooter has ABS brakes or not. These parts are actually different between the various model years and trim levels. So definitely want to make sure you get the correct components. We tend to list exactly what they fit on the Scooter West web store. We have all the original Piaggio components, but as you can see, this part's pretty crispy as well. Actually went as far as soaking that mirror with some PB Blaster because that's rather rusty. I want to make sure I can set myself up for success to remove that mirror. A lot of times people replace the master cylinders because the mirror stud will actually be rusted and broken off in the master cylinder. The brakes may work perfectly fine. For example, this GTS that's on my center lift, you might see it later in the video, we just replaced the master cylinder for that very reason. So on this scooter, we're going to replace both the master cylinder and the brake caliper. I'm also going to check the brake line because I have seen instances where the brake line's clogged up as well. And that causes a locked up brake. These rubber lines that are found on the 150s, the later models and the GTSs always had stainless steel lines that rarely give any issues unless they're melted from the exhaust system. I've seen that before. But every once in a while I will see these clogged up. The tube is, rather thick. It's about 3/8 inch thick, but the actual inner conduit that carries the high pressure brake fluid is very, very thin. So it's pretty readily able to get clogged up. So this is the specific brake master cylinder for the LXV. It's from the 2016 model. They no longer make the all silver version. So you can see it's kind of a black and silver. You kind of got to use the parts that are available. Sometimes they discontinue or supersede parts, and this is a perfect example where they did that. So the part number I'm using for this LXV is a CM085405. Very, very similar to the standard LX master cylinder. And of course, this scooter is the easiest one to do the job on. If you have a Primavera, a Sprint, the LX, the standard LX, the S, ET4, GTS, any of those, they actually have all the plastic handlebars. But if you're dealing with the LXV or GTV, they're actually exposed, so nice and easy. And if you're wondering how to take apart the handlebars on any of those other models, you can look at my prior videos. Just go to Vespa Motorsport on YouTube and do a search. Bleeding brakes, flushing brakes, handlebars. There's plenty of videos where I take the handlebar covers apart, so that would cover those steps. Another item you're gonna need for this job is the brake caliper. Pretty inexpensive. It comes loaded, which means it comes with brand new brake pads. This pretty much fits the ET4 LX quite a few years. It's a double piston, opposed piston style brake caliper, CM076101. But I thought I'd share some alternate brake calipers that we have. So here is a standard brake caliper for a Vespa GTS. You know, it's just a standard double piston sliding brake caliper, as they call it, because there's only pistons on one side that build the hydraulic pressure. But sometimes you want to upgrade the look. Well, guess what? The Gilera Runner always had the exact same caliper as the GTS. So there's actually a nice red one available. It's for the same price as the standard one. So 56056R is the standard part number for the GTS brake caliper. If it doesn't have ABS, you can actually use this on the ABS bike. You just need to change the pads. But if you add the suffix red, or you just search for that part number, you'll see it on our Scooter West web store. So it's a pretty cool caliper. I've installed a couple for my customers. You can see some of my ultra trick videos I've done in the past where we've gone as far as putting Brembo calipers. That's a quite extensive performance modification. My thought is the OEM stuff is always going to be the safest, because when you're using experimental parts, you're kind of in your own realm. But there's the red version of the GTS caliper. It looks pretty cool. We have it available. It's the same price as the standard black one. So if you have a GTS, maybe it's a perfect time to upgrade to a cool looking red caliper. And just like that ET and LX caliper, it comes loaded with brand new OEM brake pads. And a couple other good incidentals. Oftentimes the brake rotors will last several sets of brake pads, but they do get rusty, they get warped, they get grooves in them, or sometimes they'll actually measure, the thickness will be out of specification. The brake rotors are incredibly inexpensive for the OEM brake rotors. We also have cool looking aftermarket Melosi and Zaloni brake rotors that are a popular upgrade for the GTS, but I'm gonna go ahead and replace the brake rotor because it's pretty easy to do. And we're in there, start with all brand new brake components short of the brake hose. Hopefully I don't need to do that. But this is the standard LX and ET4. It even fits the Stella and the PX with the disc brake. It fits quite a few different models. The rotors kind of cross over a lot of different models, but there is probably a half dozen different SKUs of the rotors. So definitely still need to make sure you get the correct one. The one for the LX that we're gonna put on here is a 563246, and a couple incidentals that are pretty important to have. Real important to have the brake crush washers for the banjo bolts. They're kind of one-time use, and those part numbers are 127927. They're those copper washers. You're gonna need a pair for the master cylinder and a pair for the caliper anytime you change those parts out. I'm gonna go also replace the bolts that hold the rotor, because typically they have a lot of Loctite on them. You'll strip them, they're a little bit rusty, and pretty much regardless of the model, we have these bolts available. So it's 271147. They also work on the GTS front, but you actually use 6 on the larger frame Vespa as well. The small scooters like this LX or a 50cc is only gonna use 5 of those screws. And the last thing is a cotter pin. I think it's 012789-B, I think is the correct part number for the cotter pin, because we're gonna pull the front hub. And also there's a perfect opportunity to grease the front hub and the front wheel bearings. So enough of me talking, let's get started. So depending on the model, you may need to get, obviously the handlebar covers out of the way, but on this model, I'm gonna get the windshield out of the way, just to get out of the way, because you do have to swing the mirror. So you got a pair of screws that hold these windscreens to these 2 goalposts right here, and kind of give them a slide. And the one thing about these windshields, they kind of have to be flexed around the headlight to get them off. Perfect opportunity to clean it. And before we tackle removing the master cylinder, I want to get this mirror off. I've been soaking this. Okay, there we go. The only thing is the lock nut is pretty seized up. So that's that nut there, and there's the mirror shaft right there. So we'll see how that goes. Oftentimes it'd probably be just best to replace this mirror because it's pretty crusty. I can tell it's not turning so nice. A little heat will go a long ways if you do want to try to salvage the mirror. Spraying a little bit more PB Blaster in there. Kind of see if we can get it. There we go. And if it's broken in the master cylinder, well, obviously you're going to need a mirror. Another thing the master cylinder includes is a brand new original lever. I might try to see if I can free that up in the vise. There's one part that's not included with the new master cylinder, and that is the brake switch. So they have this rubber boot on the GTV and LXV. If it's underneath the handlebar covers, typically there's no boot at all. It's just the two wire terminals. Make sure ignition's off, because if you short these wires with a blown fuse, you have the pair of terminals. They just pull right off the switch. Some models actually have a little 2-pin connector. Pretty much what I'm showing you will work on pretty much any scooter that has a hydraulic brake. They're all pretty similar steps here. So I'm going to unthread that brake switch. Even the brake switch doesn't look so hot, but it's working. I know for a fact it's working because I'm able to start the scooter with this whenever I pull a lever. And you can see the lever is really, really tight. So it's kind of something is jammed up. Sometimes it could be the bleed hole. It just looks horrible in there. It's just not worth really messing with these brake components. There used to be the days where you'd rebuild a master cylinder or a brake caliper. Most of these items are inexpensive. You just replace it. I mean, it's kind of sad. That's the way it works. But you know, you got 15 years worth of life, and it was probably prematurely failed just because of all the corrosion. And the scooter's probably seen a lot of its life outside, parked outside. So one of the first things you want to do is extract all the brake fluid out of there, because it's going to drip everywhere. I mean, you could try covering this with rags, but it's best just to get the fluid out of the master cylinder so we have a minimal amount of fluid. Maybe it's so seized up you're not even able to get these screws out, so you may just need to be prepared for some leaked, gooey, ugly looking brake fluid. I know for a fact this has pretty fresh brake fluid because we tried flushing it, but that master cylinder is a little crispy in there as well on the outside, because the old brake fluid probably absorbed some moisture and it started attacking the aluminum. And some of the corrosion actually is what clogs the brake system, so keep that in mind. You don't necessarily need a syringe this large, but I happen to have this one. And that kind of did the trick. And one more trick is to just shove a disposable rag in there, and that kind of will sop up the remaining fluid. So while the master cylinder is attached to the handlebars, this is when you want to break free the banjo bolt. And in this case, it's always going to dribble a little bit. So put a little rag in between there. And it's taking quite a bit of force to kind of free that up. And we do have the banjo bolts available as a spare part as well. But just kind of catch any fluid. You just don't want it sitting on the paint, because it will damage the paint, especially the painted plastic parts. So I'm kind of capturing it. And you want to look at this banjo bolt, make sure there's not corrosion all the way through. Maybe that's a good candidate just to replace it because of that reason, if there's corrosion in there. You just don't want any corrosion attacking your new brake components. Go ahead and get rid of those two crush washers, and you may pump it just once just to get, you know, whatever last little remnant of the brake fluid out. I'll leave this rag here. And to remove the brake master cylinder, on the back side there's a pair of Allen screws, and there's a clamp that has the word up on it, because that clamp's like kind of engineered to be installed only in that orientation. A lot of corrosion in these too. I'm struggling with removing them. So, and you know, the lever's still, you know, it's not bent. Maybe it's worth taking the lever off, which would be the flat screw and the 10 millimeter, you need a 10 millimeter wrench, take that nut off the bottom, salvage the lever out of it. And at this point, we can just carefully rock it off. So, you know, there's some corrosion holding it to the handlebars. This one's pretty crispy, so I'm going to be working on a little bit to get it off. even though the clamp's off. Give it a couple taps. There we go. And the reason it's stuck is there's actually a hole in the handlebars. That's what aligns the master cylinder to the handlebars so it doesn't twist around along with the clamp. All right, I got my brand new master cylinder, original Piaggio part here. Nice brand new lever, nice and clean. You can see the window is really clean, looks perfect. You can see in there, no problem. That's pretty nice to have where you can look through the window. They do have this little cap on here, so go ahead and leave that in place. And you can see the clamp with that word up. So essentially just install it in the reverse order. You know, take this little clamp off. Yeah, one other thing is the different part numbers for master cylinders. They have different size threads, sometimes for the mirror perch. Sometimes they're reverse threads, so that's why it's pretty important to get the matched up master cylinder that's specific for your year. And I'll make sure this clamp has a word up, kind of holding it in place. Make sure you don't pinch the wiring because this, well, even regardless of the model, they do have wiring usually that goes around in close proximity to the master cylinder, and if you pinch it, you're going to end up with issues with your wiring. And first start by just evenly tightening the upper and lower clamp bolts. And since it's lined up with that peg, no issues there. Make sure that part, there's a zip tie, I'll go ahead and replace that zip tie. And just kind of go between the two. And typically, when they're starting to get snug, I'll snug the top one first. And if you want to torque this, it's only about 7 foot-pounds. They're not that tight. So now you can see it kind of everything lines up. And we'll deal with putting the switch in a little bit later. We're going to want to bleed the system. So you may want to have a rag because sometimes they do have a little bit of fluid in the brake pipe as well. So, and one other thing to check is look inside the banjo bolt for corrosion. I'll use a brand new rag. Kind of look, there's just some brake residue. And you can flush it out. You can poke, there's a real fine hole that transfers the fluid. And you could use a pretty fine piece of wire just to make sure that's poke free. And there's no residue on that, so not really an issue, but I have seen where they're clogged and that causes an issue. We're gonna flush more brake fluid through, and the fresh brake fluid tends to kind of break up any small particles and we'll send them all the way down. But if the brake hose is just clogged, also you just gotta replace it sometimes. So I'm gonna opt to replace the banjo bolt. You just search for banjo bolt, or it's an associated part with the master cylinder, so oftentimes you'll see that along with the washers. Sometimes they're a different style, like this one's got a smaller head. I think it uses a 12 millimeter, so it's a little different than the original, but the threads are gonna be the same. You know, it's like a metric, I think 10 millimeter thread. And kind of just hold the hose out of the way. Make sure this starts nice and smooth. Sometimes it's hard to get this all to line up. And there we go. So it's starting to thread in. And oftentimes you only want to tighten it just enough to barely seat those washers because we may crack those banjo bolts to flush the air out of the system. So I'm going to, I think, a 12 millimeter. So just ever so slightly. You know, right now there's no fluid in it, so the lever's quite loose. And at this point, I'm going to put the scooter jack under the center of the scooter. We're going to take the front wheel off, and I'm going to move on to the brake caliper. If all you're doing is a master cylinder, at this point, you could probably flush the system, skip the whole chapter where I'm going to do the brake caliper. All right, so I got a 6 millimeter Allen. You need just use this T handle. I have the wheel on the ground, so I can, you know, the friction of the tire is enough to break free all 5 of these wheel fasteners here. And at this point, Got the scooter jack set up right in the center of the body. The scooter's on the center stand. I don't have the wheels clamped in this lift right here, but all I want to do is just take the tire off the lift, so I'll be able to spin these. Perfect opportunity to replace these bolts if they're heavily corroded. Looks like they've been replaced actually in the past, because they certainly look nicer than a lot of other fasteners on this scooter here. Rock the wheel off, set the wheel aside, and you can see there's our hub right there, and that's the hub center nut with a cotter pin. Well, first of all, I'm gonna remove the brake caliper. The one thing is the handlebars always want to flop to the left there. You could put a bungee cord on the handlebars to kind of hold them, you know, or I'm just gonna hold them, and you have a pair of fasteners that hold the caliper in place. So go ahead and loosen those. You know, one other thing, before I get ahead of myself, it's pretty hard to actually break free the banjo bolt. So before I remove the caliper, go ahead and loosen that, or just go ahead and remove it, because it is going to dribble some of the brake fluid out. And we're probably in a similar situation where I probably should just replace that banjo bolt as well. I don't care about the washers. It's dribbling some of that fluid there. Nice thing it's on the ground there, it's not an issue. Probably should be wearing gloves, so allowing the brake fluid to touch my fingers, but in some models they'll have more than one washer, so kind of keep track of how many washers. It's just because if you don't put back both washers, you may end up with a caliper, or one of these bolts will actually drag on the on the lower one. It's a little deeper. In the ET4, they actually used to have a little wire that would hold this speedometer cable, but they got rid of that and doubled up the washers. And it looks like a washer may be missing on the top one there, so I'll probably replace that. Pull the caliper off. It may be stuck pretty well. You may need to pound it off, but you can see it's pretty crispy. The pads still had some life in them, but we're going to go ahead and replace that part. And at this point, if you're going to reuse the rotor, you're going to want to hit that with some 80 grit sandpaper to really scuff it up. The wheel bearings feel really good, but I'm going to take it a step further. We're going to go ahead and replace the rotor. So you want to take some large diagonal pliers. They happen to be the best tool for removing a cotter pin. So kind of twist that out of the way. You can certainly cut it or use vice grips or whatever you have. Kind of twist the ears. If you have big enough cutters, you could just cut this as well. So, and then I usually use the diagonals to lever the cotter pin out. Go ahead and throw that part out, and then this little cap comes right off just like that. Get a 22mm wrench. I'm going to hold on to the handlebars, and once you break that free, you just have that nut, and there's no washer or anything. Everything feels really smooth. If I had any grinding noise, I would be kind of concerned about the wheel bearings. Maybe that'd be an opportunity to replace the wheel bearings. But generally they last quite a long time on the Vespas. They're pretty well sealed up. An optional step, you can go ahead and remove the speedometer cable if you like, and there's a speedometer drive gear. It may be worth removing that, but since everything's freed up, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I'm just going to give it a couple taps as I'm rotating, and usually you won't do any damage to that speedometer drive gear. So we'll see how the grease looks in there. I have done this job in the past on video where this grease is turned into a hardened mess. This white lithium grease is still in really good shape, so I'll probably wipe it off after I replace the rotor, and then we'll just pack it with some fresh grease. And you can see inside this hub here, there's that speedometer drive gear. And that's why I was spinning it as I was removing it, because you don't want to jam up that gear. Ironically, they use a different type of grease on the inner wheel bearings. You can use the maximum waterproof grease on the inner bearings, but if I'm not going to clean all the grease off for the speedometer drive, that's actually a white lithium grease. So it's two different greases. They have a oil or a grease seal between the two. It's just something they've always done. If you completely clean all the parts out, I would just recommend going to that Maxima waterproof grease. That would be your, a better solution. Kind of works for both. All right, so a safer method, maybe put this on a hot plate and wear some gloves. That's going to be a little safer than using an open flame, or you can use a heat gun. Keep in mind, if you have brake fluid out, that brake fluid will catch on fire, so that could be flammable. Same with the grease in there. I want to take care not to burn the grease, but I do want to heat up all these screws. Don't even try removing those screws until you have them pretty hot. So, and you can also clean up the rotor and the hub at this point if you wanted to. You heat them all up. It's hot, I can tell you that. All right, let's see if I have enough heat in these fasteners. I could usually use an impact. I can tell that everything's pretty hot, but whew, that is a hot rotor there. So I'm gonna just go around, free them all up. They do have Loctite on it. The new replacement bolts, the OEM bolts, already have a special type of locking agent on them, but it's pretty precedent that you heat up these screws. And you see they're pretty rusty, but I was still able to get them all freed up pretty easily. A little bit of friction on them, and you see all that Loctite coming off those threads there. And the blue Loctite, that's heat is your friend. That's the magic that will break down. And I can already tell this one's tighter because it's probably already cooling down. I might actually hit it back with some more heat, or I could just cheat and get something like a power tool to get them off. But believe it or not, you can accidentally spin these Allen screws, and then you're in for a bigger mess. You'll be drilling out the screws. So that one's really easy. And even on here it says minimum thickness 3.5 millimeters. So typically the edge you can't measure, but you could use a special type of caliper that can measure the thinnest part of the rotor. And if it's under 3.5 millimeters or warped or soaked with oil, then it's worth replacing. Another thing to note about the rotor is there is an arrow. So I see that arrow kind of pointing, what is that, counterclockwise. So we'll go ahead and pull the old rotor off and just kind of leave it to the side so I know to put the new one on the same direction. Kind of get some of that grunge out of it. And our new rotor's kind of got an anti-rust piece of paper in there of some sort. And it looks all nice and brand new. And you can see the arrow, same spot. So again, the 50 and 150s are a 5-hole rotor. You go to the 200 or larger size Vespas, they have a 6 holes on the rotor, and the rotor's a little larger as well. All right, so you kind of get everything lined up, get all the screws started, and you can see they have this blue compound on them, so that's that Loctite. If you are going to reuse them, you could just put a coat of blue Loctite, but I don't know, braking components, I really don't like to mess around. I just start with new parts. Kind of the safest thing you can do. So again, there's a little bit of friction with that Loctite that's on the threads here. And there's a lot of Loctite in the bosses that they thread in. You can always take a tap and send it through the holes, 6 millimeter by 1 pitch tap. So at this point, we'll go ahead and torque them. If you want to use a torque wrench, it's about 7.5 foot-pounds for these little fasteners, but a little L-style Allen, as long as you just do it kind of give it a snug. And it should be fine here. And they do have the Loctite on them, so that's a good thing. Now I'm going to get the grease out and we'll repack the bearings. All right, so here I got a white lithium grease. That's the type. There's a lot of different brands out there, but it looks like this kind of white lithium paste or calcium based grease, I think it is, or something like that. But just the regular white grease. That's what you want to lubricate this mechanical speedometer drive with. You don't need that much. I'm just going to add a little bit, like a finger full, and just put it right onto that gear. Kind of work it into the gear. And then I'll put a small amount on this worm gear on the outside. Only a small amount, because any extra is going to just scrape out and spread inside the hub. There's some heat in there. This grease is still really soft, so the new grease is going to kind of keep the existing grease soft. If you really want to take it to the next level, you could certainly clean all these parts in the parts washer or replace the hub. Believe it or not, I've had ones that are so bad that I've had to replace the hub. And then just kind of carefully wipe any excess out. And if you want to repack the wheel bearings, there's a needle bearing on the inside, and on the outside is a roller bearing. But typically there's a lot of grease in there. Like I can see there's, you know, quite a bit of grease. I could just work that around to kind of get fresh grease in there. You know, in the center cavity is where they it kind of holds some excess grease in there. So if you want, you can use the Maxima waterproof grease that we have on the Scooter West web store. Also want to make sure you don't get too much grease on your brand new rotor. All right, so now we're ready to put the hub back onto the axle. So just carefully, they do have some oil seals. You want to make sure you're extra careful with them. And again, two ways to go about this. You could use a nut, but I tend to like to rotate it the direction it needs to go and just keep on tapping it. And it's all the way seated. So then wipe the excess grease off that axle. Take the axle nut, go and thread that back on. And if you want to torque this with a torque wrench, it's about 30 foot-pounds. It's not all that much. You know, something about just like that, where it's just starting to compress the suspension. And then we'll put the little castle back onto it. And I have the holes right there, so I'm lining that up with one of the slots. Go ahead and drop the cotter pin in place. And we'll use the diagonals to kind of twist the cotter pin around so it keeps everything all locked in place. It's pretty important that you have it all the way twisted, because otherwise it will interfere with that the little grease cap that's on the outer part of the wheel. And sometimes you can just use that and lever it on there, or you can use a hammer. Sometimes to get them nice and tight. There you go. So we have a brand new rotor and a hub that's all packed with fresh grease. Spins nice and freely. You might look at your speedometer, make sure the speedometer's working just fine. This rotor, I can tell it's been overheated because it was dragging. It probably could be salvaged if I sanded it. It'd probably still work. So before I even bolt the brand new brake caliper on, I'm gonna wanna start getting some of the brake fluid flushed. It's much easier to flush and bleed a brake system when the components aren't actually bolted to everything. You could kind of change the angle, get the air out of them. And I want to send some fluid through the master cylinder before it goes through this caliper. I don't want any debris that's in that line to go into this brand new caliper, especially since we're using that original line. And again, I got a little piece of wire I'm going to poke in there, make sure that that's clean in there. I could use a little small piece of rag to wipe that out. You know, if you find a clean section of a rag, just give it a little cleaning in there. I'm pretty certain this hose is still good. I did check, it flowed just fine, but you could do some preliminary test to make sure it's not clogged. You know, if you take the caliper off and the brake lever is hard as a rock, it's probably because you have a clogged brake line. So that's one little telltale right there. All right, so we'll go ahead and zip the cover off this brand new brake master cylinder here. Make sure you keep it nice and clean. Don't want any flakes of anything going in there. They have this rubber diaphragm. All those are not available as spare parts. The only way you can get this little diaphragm is by the complete caliper, or brake master cylinder, that is. And typically I like to put fresh brake fluid in like a squeeze bottle that's never had anything else in it. Just easier to control than pouring a bottle. And I'm gonna fill it about halfway up. So you can see it's starting to show up in a window. Nice having a clear window. And I have the hose underneath the little tray to capture any drips that come off the brake hose. And I'm gonna carefully pull. And oftentimes, you're not going to get it flowing on its own. You may need to tip the handlebars left or right. And in some cases, I've even taken master cylinders off to get them bled for the first time. It's just pretty hard to get them to start flowing because they do have an air pocket in them. Sometimes from the factory, they're not too bad. But I want to get fluid flowing through the system before I put the brake caliper on. So I also want to have a zip tie handy, and I'll show you why shortly, because when we close off the master cylinder, once we do get flow, the only way to stop the flow is actually pull the lever in, because it blocks off the bleed passage. And I can tell that fluid's already going down. So we're already starting to get some flow. I'm gonna go ahead and top off the master cylinder once again, almost to the top. And almost to the top. I'm actually holding the lever in because it's flowing so readily. And there we go, it's starting to flow again. Sometimes I'll give the lever little jiggles, and that gets bubbles out of the system just by doing little jiggles on the lever. And you'll see little bubbles kind of erupt out of the little hole, the bleed hole that's on the master cylinder. Now I still have this banjo bolt. It's still fairly loose, so just remember that. And it looks like we're starting to have some good flow. And oftentimes I'll put my fingers on the banjo bolt right down here and squeeze it, see if I could feel some pressure building. And then let the pressure loose, and then go ahead and let the lever go. And maybe do that 2 more times. Squeeze. Put your hands over the banjo bolt, let go, and you can feel a little pressure release. And it's flowing pretty readily. And at this point, the master cylinder is almost empty, and that's no issue there. I'm gonna go ahead and put the zip tie around the lever, and it nearly stops the flow of fluid dropping out of the brake line. So just like that, we'll cut that zip tie shortly. I'm gonna carefully tip that over. It's pretty low right now, and that's fine. I just want to be extra careful not to have any brake fluid drip anywhere on the painted bodywork. And if you're uncertain about it, you may want to cover the whole scooter with plastic and maybe a beach towel or something that you don't need anymore. So just keep that in mind. So just like the master cylinder, I'm going to go ahead and replace the banjo bolt because that original part does have a small amount of rust, just not worth using in my opinion for an inexpensive part. So I dropped a brand new washer on that master cylinder. You kind of want to mock up the location of where this caliper will go. The bleed screw is going to go at the top. They do have this little plastic thing that kind of keeps the piston spread, and when everything's all brand new, it just slides right on, no issues, kind of like that. And they do have that little cap under there. So I'm going to go ahead, put the banjo bolt through the bottom of the hose. Is kind of how it naturally goes into the caliper. Believe it or not, I've seen people mess it up and twist the hose all up. And then we're going to put a second washer. And we'll kind of mock up the position. They have this stopper right here, and that's the that kind of is the stopper for the brake hose. So you can kind of see the location. See how the brake hose stops right there? Go ahead and thread that all the way in. So just like that, you can see the hose is up against that stopper. Generally, most of these master cylinder or brake calipers do have a stopper like that. And again, we're not going to tighten it all that tight. So just like that. And I'm going to kind of just set that in place, just like that. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and cut the zip tie. I'm going to put one of the screws in just to kind of hold the caliper in place, because I don't want to pop the pistons out. I'm using, you know, the pistons will have the brake disc to kind of go up against. So just in there, just kind of hold it all in place, just like that. Go ahead and move back up here to our master cylinder. We're going to pop our zip tie. You can actually reuse zip ties a lot of times, so just poking out the tab here. Good way to stab myself to save a zip tie, but the price to save a zip tie there. And the master cylinder is pretty low again. So we're going to bring it all the way up to the very top of the sight glass. There's a little scribe in there. I would say it's about a 1/4 inch below this rim right here is the maximum amount. You just see a little bubble at the top of the master cylinder there. So I'm just carefully pulling the lever, just giving it little pulls, because sometimes it will want to squirt fluid up. We do also have a little Motion Pro part, a little one-way valve that makes for an easy bleed. Here in the shop, I have a really nice vacuum pump, but I'm trying to show how you do this job if you're a do-it-yourselfer. You kind of got to get everything primed, like I did earlier. Got the line and the master cylinder primed, and I can already tell it's starting to build some pressure here. Giving it little wiggles. Just be careful not to move it too much, because you will end up with spilled fluid. Hold the lever, and sometimes I'll go under here and just break the banjo bolt free, and it's going to dribble out, and that's fine. We'll go ahead and tighten that back up. And then I'm going to go ahead and carefully let go of the lever. And I think most of my air at this point is we're going to have to open up the bleed screw at the top of the brake caliper. So we're getting pretty close. Sometimes just letting it go out quick kind of will get more air bubbles out of the system. I'm kind of watching inside the fluid. I'm looking at air bubbles, and I'm kind of changing my angle, and that kind of allows the bubbles to come up the line. If you're doing the rear circuit on a GTS, that's going to be much more difficult because that hose is much longer. This hose just goes straight up. And if you have an ABS braking system, you're probably just best off having a dealer do the job. They have special procedures for bleeding an ABS pump, and you can do it with the factory tools along with a vacuum bleeder. So on the new caliper, well, I happen to have the old one right here, there's a little rubber cap on this little top thing here, and you're going to want to put a 10mm wrench on that and a little hose, and we're going to break that free and allow the bubbles that are kind of built up in the caliper out of the system. Again, take extra care not to bump everything all around. Can't really see because the camera angle hasn't changed here, but all right, so I have the top of the master cylinder or the brake caliper, and there's a little spigot that you can put a hose on. This hose is a little on the tight side, but I think I'll be able to get it on there. And once you have a hose, you can have it go into that container right there. And we're going to go ahead and open this, and I'm going to go ahead and squeeze the brake caliper. I'm going to close that, let it go. Kind of watch it. You don't want to run your brake caliper low on, or your brake master cylinder low on fluid. So I'm going to do that several times until we're getting a flow out. And again, it's much easier if you do have a power bleeder or one of those one-way valve. But whenever you let go of the lever, you want to have this valve closed so it doesn't pull air back into the system, because when you let the lever go, it puts a little suction on the brake system. So whenever you pull, go ahead and open it, and I see some fluid come out just a little bit, and then before I release the lever, have that closed and then let go. And you can give it a couple pumps in between. And go ahead and hold the lever, and it kind of let a bunch of air and a little bit of fluid out, close it, and just repeat. It may take, you know, a dozen tries to get this to go, but I could tell it's building up pressure. The lever is not going all the way to the grip, and I'm getting to a point where I need to actually top off the brake fluid reservoir again. Pretty close, but right now, see how it has pressure? I can't quite pull it all the way to the grip, but it's still, that lever's, there's air in the system certainly, so. And it pulls right to the grip right when I open it. And before I release the lever, I'm gonna go ahead and top this back off. And again, if you have brand new brake pads and all new components, you can have the reservoir all the way up to the top. And it's getting pretty close at this point. And a couple little bubbles, and doing the little turn always helps, kind of going back and forth, because you change the angle. And it's getting pretty close, I would say. Maybe 1 or 2 more pulls at the bottom. And sometimes if you just still can't quite get the lever feel, you may want to put a rag around the banjo bolt. And I'll use this as an example right here. So I like to even bleed it just a little bit around the banjo bolts. You want to just put a little pressure on the lever, and then just go ahead and open it, and then squeeze, and then we're going to do the final torquing of this banjo bolt. You don't want to over tighten these. They don't really have, they do have a torque value, and it's pretty low, but they definitely need to be snug, you know, where it kind of bites into that copper washer. So we're getting pretty close, and I think I'm going to go down at the bottom and give it 1 or 2 more pulls. And you could do the same even with the banjo bolt down here too, just to let a little of the pressure out. And then we'll do a final torque on that banjo bolt. And I think I'm gonna do 1 or 2 pulls on the top. So, oh, that feels good now. I think we're right at the perfect amount, which is kind of the indication, a good indication there's no air in the system. And these rubber lines, they have a little bit of sponginess to it, which is kind of normal. If you have the steel lines and everything's perfect, you may have a lever that's much, just kind of has more resistance. At this point, I'll pull this hose off. And we have a perfectly bled system, I would say, because you see the lever is at the grip right now. And I'll carefully let it go. And with everything sealed up and closed off, I can pump it a few times. See how it just has a little bit of free play. And of course, brand new braking components, they got to seat in. So this lever probably will get a little bit tighter as the brakes seat in. Obviously, I'm going to take it on a test ride, do a couple heavy brakes to kind of bead the new brake pads in. And just the act of pumping it sometimes will bring the last little bubbles up. But I don't see any bubbles coming up into the master cylinder, so I think we're pretty set. I'm gonna go ahead and top off the master cylinder for the last time. Then we'll put the cap on, and I'm gonna carefully tip that to the side. And when it's tipped to the side, the level's almost to the edge, but not quite overfilling. So we'll go ahead and put the rubber diaphragm in. I like sometimes just to drop that right in. Make sure everything's perfectly clean. There's in some cases, they do have a plastic piece in here. This new one is all just cast into the top. And we'll go ahead and tighten the screws. Kind of go between the two. Nice brand new master cylinder. The black one's gonna hold up a little better than that original one. One thing to keep in mind is we do have, I think it was 2016 and later on the GTV and the LXV, they actually had a plastic chrome cover. There's actually 4 different part numbers for that chrome cover, and typically we stock all of them. It's a nice beauty cover that goes over that, but you do have to use a different mirror setup. So keep that in mind if you're looking to spiff up the looks and don't really want this black master cylinder. There is a factory replacement part. While we're still up here, I'm going to go ahead and thread this brake switch in. And it's just got pretty fine threads. Again, good opportunity just to replace it if it's pretty corroded. These switches do fail. A lot of people say bring a scooter in because it doesn't start. And it ultimately comes down to both brake switches have failed. Because pretty much the interlock for nearly every automatic scooter is you got to pull a brake to start the motor. You know, much like a motorcycle, manual transmission motorcycle, you got to pull the a clutch in some cases. This, they use the brake. You could just hand tighten it and then put the 2 terminals back on, or sometimes in some cases that connector. The 2 little leads go right on, and everything's kind of safe electrically now, so I'm going to actually turn the ignition on just to see if the brake light comes on, and I do see it coming on, no problem there. And I'm going to go back down here. We're going to tighten everything up. So I have that bleed screw torque, just hand torqued. We'll put the rubber cap on. I have the screw with a double flat washer going in the bottom. You could put Loctite on these, it's not really needed. But you could do that if you wanted to. The blue Loctite, they have that wave washer, and that's what locks it in place. And if you're wondering what the torque is for these, it should be about 16 foot-pounds, just like the wheel fasteners. So about that is about 16 foot-pounds, kind of where you got to put a little bit of effort into it. Don't ever remove the pair of black screws on the caliper. You'll end up with a leak, and that's not what you want. Clean up our brake fluid mess. And we'll put the wheel back on and carefully take it on a test ride. Just do a couple light brakes with the new front brake components at first, make sure they're working good, and then we'll do some emergency test brakes, kind of get on it pretty heavily, to bead those brand new brake pads into the rotor. Obviously you don't want to do it so many times that you overheat the rotor or glaze the rotor. And it's pretty important, once you get everything assembled, just double check everything after you do the test ride. This is your brake system. Probably the most important safety feature on your scooter is the brakes and having functional brakes. So don't want to have any errors, whether it's a fastener that's incorrectly installed or a hydraulic brake leak. And if you want to torque these, 16 foot-pounds, that's all you need to do on these. And kind of want to go back and forth, or like in a star pattern. So from here to there, you see it's kind of pulling the wheel on. 2 is going to get it pretty close. Kind of go back to that one a little bit, and then over to here. This isn't the final torque sequence, so you just want to get them all snug. At this point, go back to that first one. Pretty important you don't over tighten these because it will strip out the fasteners when it comes time to remove the wheel again. There we go. One other thing you're going to need is .4 brake fluid. It's not .3 like you use in a car. We sell small bottles of quality brake fluid from both EBC and Brembo in the correct size, and it's the correct .4, not the .3 that you find in most cars. So definitely pretty important you have a whole bottle. And that zip tie I salvaged, I'm going to use that to reinstall to hold this wiring back in place. And in most of the models, they do have wiring that's held in place on the handlebars with zip ties. So again, this was the easiest situation because it has the exposed master cylinder right here. So nice and easy. And we're going to go ahead and install the mirror and the windshield, take it on a test ride. So go ahead and thread the mirror in. I did heat up this lock nut right here and spray it with more PB Blaster. Then I put some anti-seize on it because I wasn't going to replace the mirror for the customer, sorry, unless they want to buy one. We do have them available. I want to get the mirror head directly over the grip. That's usually a good starting point. and then tighten the lock nut. So again, it's a little different setup if you have the master cylinder cover, it's a little cleaner. And then we'll put the windshield on, and I think the brakes are gonna feel great on this scooter. All right, so that's pretty much everything you need to know, short of if you have a much more advanced scooter with ABS brakes. Maybe I'll cover that in another day, and how to use a power bleeder. Maybe there'd be some aftermarket tools for actuating ABS pumps and all that. But it's great. I replaced this. I look in here, there's a lot of grunge and stuff like that, and that's probably what was causing the brake caliper to lock up. I know for a fact the pistons had some rust on it. Just when you get corroded brake components, it's a recipe for a disaster. You end up with a brake system that locks up or just doesn't act the way it should be. A lot of times no one ever flushes the brake fluid for the life of the scooter, and you go pull that lever and it just pulls straight to the grip, and no amount of flushing is going to fix the brake system if there's already corrosion internal in the system. If you're regular at flushing the brake fluid every 2 years like they recommend, these components probably last you 25, 30 years. Heck, I drive a 1991 Jeep and it still has most of the original brake components on it, and it's been well cared for. So just depends on how you take care of your stuff. And of course, the brake fluid is something that a lot of people overlook, but fortunately, you can still get these parts all pretty inexpensive and refurbish the brake system to like new. We'll see you on the next one. Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. And again, if you're wondering where to get any of these components, check us out on the web, ScooterWest.com. You can look up your make and model and the year and the specifics for the various parts. We likely have all these parts in stock ready to ship to you throughout the country, so you can successfully do this job right in your own garage and have a safe scooter. See you on the next one. Robot here.